Hello there, my name is Kevin Parson and I live and work in the Diss and Halston area. And today we've got an absolutely special chat today because there's actually three people here rather than the normal sort of banter of two people. And I have with me today Richard Cranmer and Robert Connelly, both from the Archbishop Sancroft School. And of course, because we're in the crisis that we're in, I thought it'd be a good idea to have a chat as to see how COVID-19 has affected Archbishop Sancroft and what problems they're having. So first of all, I thought if we could go to you, Rob, and say, you know, well, first of all, obviously, hi, hello, how are you?
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, very well, thanks. It's really good of you to invite Richard and I to join you today. I'm well, my family are well, which is the most important thing. And we tend to be having that conversation with so many different people at the moment. And the first thing is checking in on how everybody is. But yeah, interesting times, as you've sort of referenced in your previous interviews that you've done. But yeah, as I say, thankfully I'm well and my family are well and the school community is well.
And Richard, welcome too. And how are you? How are you coping with the situation at the moment?
Yep, thank you, Kevin. I think we're coping well, but I mean, how to judge that against what is just such an unusual time that none of us have ever experienced before. So, but you know, I think safe to say I'm well, I'm healthy, my family's healthy, and those around us are healthy. So that's the key thing.
Oh, that's really good. So yes, as I was alluding to, obviously with the Archbishop Sancroft School, I just thought we'd actually just explore sort of how COVID-19 is affecting the school and really what's happening there. I'm sure it's of interest to the local community. So, Rob, if I can just come to you first and say, you know, has it affected? Obviously, the school's been closed, but how has it affected the school?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, Kevin, is to sort of outline that actually schools haven't closed. Schools in the way in which you and I knew them before have closed in terms of the provision for us up to 500 children with sort of 70 adults within the school on a daily basis. That's changed. But actually the provision that we have in place, we are still providing an education, albeit virtually for the vast majority of our community, but the school has been reopened as a childcare provision. And one of the biggest challenges for us was that we didn't know this until you did, until everybody else did. We weren't given any lead-in time. And when it was announced to the wider population was the same point which we knew that we were to reopen on that Monday as a childcare provision. So I've gone from sort of being the head of a school as you and I know it, to overnight being the head of a virtual school and a childcare provision. And we were really reliant upon what we've got, which is an incredible community to work with us, and the support of Richard in his role with St Benet's Multi-Academy Trust, the Diocese of Norwich, to really put a package together that made sure every single member of our school community has been catered for and supported through what is a time that no one has ever experienced before.
So, Richard, I think really it's probably been a bit of a logistical nightmare in terms of getting something ready for both the pupils, obviously, who are online schooling, and also the provision sort of in the school itself.
Yeah, I think it's a good word to use, Kevin. Nightmare. I mean, the nightmare came to us, so it's a challenge that we've sort of had to face and work through solutions. And as Rob said, you know, working with the heads is what I have always loved doing. When I was a head, you know, working with other colleagues and working out solutions between us, because no one of us has the answer, particularly in this situation. So yeah, complex as far as trying to meet the needs of everyone, I think has been the hardest thing. So in my world, I am the link with the Department for Education. So things, an initiative and instructions that have been coming from the DFE, I've tried to be a buffer between the DFE and the heads to try and reduce the amount of information that they're having to deal with it coming at them from above, because they've got the information coming from parents who are anxious, they've got staff who are incredibly anxious about youngsters, and they've got the youngsters themselves about whom they know most. You know, they can't claim that I have that same relationship. So yeah, nightmare and complex would be the two words I describe.
And I guess really as effectively their employer, and I suppose this is really probably for both of you really, that you're also their employer in effect, whilst not paying the wages, you're still responsible for those teachers and ensuring their well-being.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And we've always say, as a school community, we talk about the family coming first, whether that be in relation to our students and their families or our colleagues. And we've got to remember that we were asking members of staff within a very quick turnaround, within 48 hours, to reorganise and restructure the curriculum from a way in which they've been used to delivering it to a totally different way. And these are parents themselves. These are people like myself who have their own children, who are at home. They've got their own families, and it's been a huge task, and the task continues. And it's been a constant juggle. And I think as Richard has said, he's acting as a buffer. One of the things I'm now thinking about is, okay, at some point the school will need to return. And it will be, we've heard this phrase, new normal, being termed a lot. And we're trying to understand what that might look like. However, what I'm also trying to do is limit how much I'm sort of involving the staff at this point in time, because I'm conscious that they're still being asked to deliver a curriculum every day to our students outside of the school building. So the way in which we're used to thinking has had to change overnight. And that, I relish a challenge. I absolutely love a challenge. I don't particularly like this challenge, if I'm completely honest, because of the degree of uncertainty. And yes, in the privileged role that I have, we're dealing with people's lives, but the element of health that now comes into this that really concerns me, when you hear of families in our community who have suffered from this virus, including staff members and their wider family. It's been a real challenge.
I think the other thing I would add, Kevin, if I may, is, I mean, Rob used the word deliver a curriculum, which of course is that is the bread and butter of what schools do. You know, we teach youngsters, we prepare them for the next stage of their life, if that's GCSEs or whatever it is. But I don't think many people realise what else schools deliver these days. So literally delivering food to people's houses, to youngsters' parents' houses, has been a big part of the operation that Heads have been involved in. And I think what this experience has done is has highlighted the wider role that schools play these days in doing that. And I know that's been a really big challenge, not only logistically, because there's been some issues in the practicalities of getting vouchers and so on that people may have read about, but actually the emotional strain of feeling, as Rob has alluded to, that the schools are they're not just exam factories, they're providing a huge amount of wraparound care for a lot of people.
Yeah, and so sort of, you know, when you're looking at sort of obviously what you're doing in the day-to-day role, your roles now, Rob, particularly presumably your role has changed out of whatever you would imagine when you first came into the head teacher's role. Sort of was it 2 or 3 years back? I can't remember now.
Yeah, 2 years ago. And I think that there certainly wasn't any training in this element of the job, Kevin. And I've learned from some very good head teachers, and I include Richard in that. And one of the things that I've always it's been made very clear to me is there will be people who know, don't worry. So if you're unsure in a situation, there are people to turn to, people like Richard, people like my previous employers. In this situation, we've not had that. And that's been a really tough one, actually, because you're having to think on your feet. And from the outset, I made it clear to the leadership team at Ashes and my colleagues that everything we must do it with the families and our children at the forefront. And actually, education is really important. And by that, I'm talking about academic outcomes and making sure that the gap between learners doesn't increase. Now, that's inevitable because there are some children who have different amounts of access to internet, to equipment, to resource, to support in the home. We get that. But actually, if we make sure everything we do is done from a position of love, we generate hope within our community. We want people to feel optimistic. We have to generate that, and we have to communicate that to our families because this will pass. And I've made sure that we've used that as our foundation in terms of any communication that we've had. I'm in regular contact with families, writing to them weekly. The school's Twitter account is full of so many amazing examples of what our students, what our staff have been up to over the past sort of 5 or 6 weeks. But no, we're having to use and draw on resources that perhaps we didn't know we had, which is a test. But I'm delighted with how the school community has responded.
And obviously we don't know sort of how, when we get through lockdown, not quite sure how it's going to be, but can you imagine that sort of when you return to school, whenever that might be, that certainly in the short term it will be different, but do you think you will be going back to how it's always been, or do you think there will be new things that you brought in? For example, in my business, we've had to go digital very, very quickly. And I've been thinking about it for 2 years, not really done much. Now, I've had to fast forward within about 6 weeks and make it all digital. Well, do you think you'll have some sort of difference when you go back? Have you got a plan for the future, or short term, medium term, long term, or?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of what we're doing now, we're using a virtual platform that we've operated as a school for about 4 years. We introduced it as a platform to communicate homework, in effect. We've now utilised that to develop our virtual school. Things will definitely change, and I think all of us have learned in the past 6 weeks that we could operate differently. The amount of meetings that I'm called to outside of school, the visits to London, the visits to back into Norwich, the journeys that we make, I think we can learn a lot from that in terms of how we can become more efficient. I also think there is a huge void that we've lost at the moment, which is about how we promote relationships, and our community is missing that, and that is critical. By bringing the whole Ashes family together, we're missing that, because as Richard has said, we have a role beyond that of delivering a formal education. For some children, we are their family, and we are there. For some children, we are their church as a church school, because they come to us 5 days a week, and we provide stability, we provide pastoral care. As Richard said, we provide food. And some of our families are missing that at the moment. So I really hope that we return to some of that, what we know as normal, in the future. In the short term, with social distancing, that's going to be very hard. It's going to be very hard saying we are open, but only for these identified families, these identified students. And Gavin Williamson, the Secretary of State for Education, has suggested only this week that any return is likely to be a phased return. And the considerations we're going to have, and going back to what I said earlier, having Richard, having the trust, having other head teachers within the trust to be able to discuss that is critical, because we can't be expected to make those decisions in isolation.
Yeah.
I can just add a bit to that about the moving forward. Well, no, there's a couple of things. First of all, one thing that I think will have changed beyond what you've covered already with the use of IT and the way that we teach, I think people like Rob and the other heads in the mat have had the most almighty baptism in dealing with a scenario to which there are no clear answers, and to be adaptable and to be creative. Now, no one on this planet would ever have wished this would have happened, but it's happened. And if we're looking for ways that we can be better from it, I think that will be one of them, that no school leader, and I include myself in this after quite a few years of headship, has ever been in that scenario where they just don't know what's going to be happening in the future. And Rob and I, if you don't mind me saying, Rob, we had a situation a few weeks ago. We were talking about, Rob was asking typically about, I want to get back, I want to get the school running again. When will I be able to do that? And I said, I don't know. But of course, Rob being Rob doesn't accept that. He wants me to give him a date. Well, I can't give him a date because no one can give him a date. So it's been a really interesting challenge from a leadership point of view to be able to work, as you do, Kevin, in your world, to be able to work in this sense of unknown, where in the past you could have talked to Siri or looked it up or Googled it. You would have found an answer somewhere. There ain't no answers out there at the moment.
Well, it is certainly unprecedented times. And finally, I'd just like to ask you sort of the $64 million question. When do you think you might be going back?
You're going to leave it, Rob.
Now, in those situations like this, Kevin, I draw to someone who's slightly more experienced. I'm going to ask Richard to answer
that. Kevin, the earliest, my best guess is the earliest it could be is early June. That is not saying schools will open in June, but I'm really pleased with the way that some of the top professionals in education are liaising really closely with the government at this point today, and they will be over the weekend, and they will be forming the judgment, the decisions that we will hear about on Monday and Tuesday. I know because they've been coming to me to ask me what my views have been, and I've engaged Rob in that as well. So there's a lot of thinking and there's a lot of planning, but it's being done by people who understand schools. And all I can say is, as we've done all the way along, is to put our trust, putting politics aside, we put our trust in those in authority to make those decisions, and then we will all have to work with them, understanding that not every decision will be the one that we might have chosen, but to understand that they have an even bigger picture than any one of us. So let's go for something happening in June, July time.
Great, thanks very much. You've heard it. Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, just to add, I think one of the things we talk about all the time within our school community is relationships, decisions are based on trust. And at this point in time, we have to trust that people are looking at the scientific evidence, the impact on health, before we can bring schools back together. And we have to trust that those conversations are being made. But then equally, when that information is communicated to us, we then need to look at our own context. So, okay, a decision may be made centrally, but we then need to be making a decision in our own context in terms of staffing numbers. What can we do to sort of follow the government advice, but at the same time making sure we place student and staff welfare at the forefront of any decision that is made.
That's absolutely great. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. I've really enjoyed that. It's been a really good discussion on basically, obviously, on a little bit of insight into the sort of education and what's happening. And I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in this. So thanks for your time. And for you people out there, if you obviously are connected with Harleston or the school and like to make any comments below, please do so. We're delighted to sort of hear your views. And also, if you know anyone who in other schools who may wish to sort of want to talk about their school, then please do let me know. And one final word I'd just like to say, Rob and Richard, thanks so much for your time, and look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks ever so much, Kevin. Thank you.